Hi, this is Mike Gant, and today we're continuing our study of the Acts of the Apostles. Last time I did kind of a general introduction to the study and to the book and what we're going to do. So we'll begin now at verse 1 of chapter 1. The first account I composed, Theophilus, about all that Jesus began to do and teach. I'll keep going because the sentence keeps going. Until the day when he was taken up to heaven, after he had by the Holy Spirit given orders to the apostles whom he had chosen. That's kind of a long sentence. Not really surprising that a long sentence comes from Luke because he was a co-worker with the apostle Paul. We'll see later in the book of Acts that at various points in time, roughly from chapter 16 to the last chapter, which is chapter 28, he'll say, we did this, we saw that, this happened to us. So he was with Paul. He was a co-worker with Paul. Paul mentions him in at least one of his letters. And Paul was noted for long sentences. And, that comes through. Even I think the translators try to break the sentences up sometimes. But the New American Standard Bible, because it's trying to be as faithful as possible to the original, it appears to me that if there's a long sentence there, it's because they felt like, okay, Paul is writing a long sentence and we're going to give you what he's got. So Luke can be a little bit like, not surprising that Luke could be a little bit like Paul. So he says, the first account I composed, Theophilus. Now, he's talking to someone named Theophilus. The only other place we see this name in the Bible is in the book of Luke. At the very beginning of the book of Luke, it says this: inasmuch as many have undertaken to compile an account of the things accomplished among us, just as they were handed down to us by those who from the beginning were eyewitnesses and servants of the word, it seemed fitting for me as well, another long sentence, having investigated everything carefully from the beginning, to write it out for you in consecutive order, most excellent Theophilus. And the sentence actually goes on a little bit longer. I'll read into verse 4, so that you may know the exact truth about the things you have been taught. So that raises the question, who was this Theophilus? And I want to double check something here real quick. Yes, I wanted to make sure my memory wasn't deceiving me. These are the only two places that you see the word Theophilus in the Bible. Now, as a translation from Greek, that word Theophilus, if broken down, would mean lover of God. Theos is the Greek word for God. Philos or philo is the Greek word for love, particularly brotherly love. That's where the name of the city of Philadelphia comes from, the city of brotherly love, which was a city in the Bible that the American city of Philadelphia was named after. So this Theophilus, who was he? Well, we don't know. It could have been, some people think it was a relatively wealthy man who was going to support Luke, was going to underwrite the writing of this gospel. And that's the way books were written, sometimes in antiquity and sometimes today. Most of the time people write books for royalties. It's a business. You write a book, the bookseller or the publisher will pay you a royalty based on how many copies of the book they're able to sell. But there is such a thing as writing under contract. And so I wrote a book a long time ago under contract. They paid me, I forget what it was, 2 cents a word, something like that. It was a book about computers and insurance. You wouldn't be interested, but that's a whole nother story. But the point is that this man could have been paying Luke to write this, just compensating him so he's got food to eat or put on the table. Or another possibility is that Theophilus wasn't an actual individual, but was used as a way to name the type of people that Luke was writing for, which would be lovers of God, people who who loved God. In other words, you love God, and I'm going to write this book for you telling you about Jesus because that's the kind of thing you'll be interested in. So I don't know that that's ever been settled, but I'm pretty sure that it doesn't need to be settled because the name works either way. So that's Theophilus. He says, the first account I composed. Well, now you see what the first account he's talking about. The first account will be the Gospel of Luke. And that's one of the ways that we're reminded that Luke was the author of the book of Acts, or the Acts of the Apostles, because it's the same man who wrote the Gospel of Luke, which bears his name. The Acts of the Apostles doesn't have Luke's name in the title, and his name doesn't appear in the text. And that's not unusual. The other Gospels, the Gospel writers don't actually claim, I am the author or something like that. But that's not unusual either, because nonfiction books today, seldom in the text of a book does an author name himself. Usually you find the author on the title page, which is usually put together by the publisher. And so whether the writer puts his name on a title page or not, the work is his, because people know that because he hands it over to the publisher. And then the publisher gets it set up to print and so forth. Of course, back then they didn't have printers, and they didn't have a book trade, at least not like the one we have today. They did sell books, but it just was a much smaller sort of operation because all the books had to be handwritten. And if you wanted a copy of a book, you had to handwrite the copy. So enough said about the name Theophilus. He says the first account I composed, that's the book of Luke, the Gospel of Luke. Now he's going to tell us about, he told us all about Jesus. Now he's going to tell about the apostles. And you're going to see that just like in Luke, the Gospel of Luke in the book of Acts takes great care with the history. He gives a lot of historic details, which make the historicity of the Acts of the Apostles easier to confirm. Okay, the first account I composed, Theophilus, about all that Jesus began to do and teach. All that he began to do and teach. I think that word begin is important because he's going to show in the book of Acts that Jesus is going to continue to do and teach, only now he's going to be doing it through his apostles. Jesus is in heaven. He's ascended there, or at least Luke is going to tell us about that in the first chapter of Acts, give us some details. And he is, Jesus ascends there, and then from there directing the apostles and doing miracles, the same sort of miracles he did on earth, only now he's doing them through the hands of his apostles instead of through his earthly hands. And Jesus did and taught, do and teach. The apostles did and taught, do and teach. In other words, Jesus and the apostles did things, that is, they performed works of healing, but they also taught. And the deeds of healing became signs to everyone that God was with them. These are dramatic signs that God is with these people in a special way. And then the teaching was what God wanted people to learn at that time. And particularly, he wanted to learn that Jesus was Lord and was to be followed. So that's the first verse. For the first account I composed, Theophilus, about all that Jesus began to do and teach, until the day when he was taken up to heaven, after he had by the Holy Spirit given orders to the apostles whom he had chosen. Now, it's interesting to me that at the end of the Gospel of Luke, Luke gives a synopsis, a little summary of what happened when Jesus ascended into heaven, which he's going to expand on now in the first two chapters of the book of Acts. So he gives a, what's another word for it? A miniature, a synopsis, a summary. I guess that's good enough. Let me read to you from the end of Luke. The last 4 verses read as follows. And he, meaning Jesus, led them out as far as Bethany, and he lifted up his hands and blessed them. And while he was blessing them, he parted from them and was carried up into heaven. And they, after worshiping him, returned to Jerusalem with great joy and were in the temple praising God. Now, what's going to happen in Acts chapter 1 is he's going to expand on that. He's going to take that pithy few sentences and he's going to elaborate on them and tell the same story again, only with more detail. This is what happens in the book of Genesis. In the book of Genesis, God tells about creation, how he created man on the 6th day. But then in chapter 2, he comes back and tells the story with more detail. And he gets to the part about how the way he created Adam and Eve was to first create Adam. Then he puts Adam to sleep, takes part of Adam's insides, his ribs say, and fashions into that Eve to be his helpmate, to be the first female. So that same pattern that we saw in Genesis as far as creation, we see again here. And we've probably seen other places in the Bible as well. It's just not coming to my mind right now. But Acts chapter 1 is going to be an extended retelling of what Luke reported at the end of his gospel. I'll say it again. And he led them out as far as Bethany, and he lifted up his hands and blessed them. While he was blessing them, he parted from them and was carried up into heaven. And they, after worshiping him, returned to Jerusalem with great joy and were continually in the temple praising God. Now you might hear that and say, oh, I wish he'd tell us more. Hey, good news. We got the more right here in Acts chapter 1, and we're going to be going through that. But this is enough for today, and I'll look forward to telling you more next time. We'll pick it up right here at Acts chapter 1, verse 3 the next time. Thanks for reading with me.